Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Squadron Leader Peter Lisney, and in this episode, we see how the RAF prepares its people to deploy on operations. We'll also have an operational update in reheat, but first, see if you can identify this noise. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Now, before the RAF sends its Expeditionary Air Wings on ops, it makes sure they are prepared to deal with both the expected and the unexpected. We sent our correspondent, SAC Emma Kirwan, to the Operational Training Centre to find out how this is achieved.
To start with, an Expeditionary Air Wing is a construct that actually dates back to the 2nd Tactical Air Force in the Second World War.
That's the areas you really need to get to, such that when everything happens for real, they're calm, they're relaxed, and they know how to deal with it.
We're all alive to the worry of what's happening in Eastern Europe, and it's our job now to just make sure that we're prepared to do whatever we are required to do alongside our NATO colleagues.
To be honest, firstly, I haven't been deployed before, so going into this episode I was curious myself about what training actually is put on for personnel. I visited the Operational Training Centre, which delivers pre-deployment training packages to prepare people for deployment. During my visit, personnel were being put through their paces ahead of deploying to Romania on Operation Biloxi. More on that later, but first I met Wing Commander Melmoth, who explained more about what the OTC actually is.
So I'm an RAF training officer and I work here at RAF Leeming as the officer commanding of the Operational Training Centre. So we work at RAF Leeming, but we actually have our boss down in RAF High Wycombe. He works under 11 Group, which is the operational group for the Royal Air Force. So we're quite a small organisation, and we're charged by 11 Group to train and prepare Expeditionary Air Wings to go on operations anywhere around the world. We have a second role as well, which is to evaluate our Air Force capabilities, so the aircraft that we've got and the people who enable those aircraft to perform a function against NATO standards. So we have a tie-in with NATO, and we also have a tie-in with RAF standards.
What are some of the standards?
We have collective training objectives that are set by 11 Group for what they expect the Royal Air Force units to be able to do. So in the Expeditionary Air Wings case, they expect them to be able to perform functions across operations, logistics and force protection. But we also look at the command function as well. So we are looking at the commander and whether he or she can lead effectively when they do deploy on operations. And then from the NATO perspective, there's a book that lists all of the standards that every NATO nation is expected to achieve to meet the NATO standard.
You get Expeditionary Air Wings ready for deployment. What actually are they?
I mean, to start with, an Expeditionary Air Wing is a construct that actually dates back to the 2nd Tactical Air Force in the Second World War, and it was something that sat above flying squadrons and enabled them to be commanded effectively from deployed operating bases, depending on where they might be around the world. So the idea is that the wing sits above one or more squadrons who are then commanded by that air wing, and they can be enabled through everything from logistics, resupply, fuel, weapons, the people side of the deployment, and even down to the sort of the operational output as well, being fed through, and the Expeditionary Air Wing aware of what's going on within that operation. So that's the origin of Expeditionary Air Wings. And around 2006 onwards, they realised, or the Air Force realised, that we needed to reinvent this, and so we went back to the drawing board and came up with a plan for it. And we actually have 6 contingent EAWs, Expeditionary Air Wings, at any one time who are trained and held at readiness to deploy anywhere around the world. here this week we've actually got 121 EAW, which is constructed from individual augmentees, so it's not one of those contingent EAWs. It's a group of people who've been drawn from across the Royal Air Force under a commander who actually has only just recently returned from being an Expeditionary Air Wing commander out in the Middle East. And he's very experienced, and he's come here with a brand new group of people to be brought together as a team and then trained against those NATO and UK standards before they deploy out to Romania for Operation Biloxi. Operation Biloxi is a NATO enhanced air policing operation. So this is where the UK has been invited to contribute to a more enhanced air policing in that country on behalf of NATO, with Romania, who are obviously a NATO partner.
So 121 EAW will have all of the usual training that happens at the operational training centre, but also having to just get to know each other as well. They've got all those challenges of trying to gel together as a team.
That's right. Sunday afternoon they arrived with us, and the first thing we did was put them through some foundation training. So that's a requirement again set by Air Command headquarters to make sure they understand the origin of the Expeditionary Air Wing, what the different functions are, and how they'll be operating together, command and control, and so on. Then on Monday we went through some team working delivery, exactly as you say. So getting them together, and that was facilitated by some of our training colleagues here at RAF Leeming. So that helped them to do a bit of ice breaking, get to know each other. We've then gone into a phase where we've been educating them and getting them various briefings from the different departments across Air Command and further afield, so that they know what they're going into on this real operational deployment that they have. And right now we've now gotten into an exercise phase where we've developed a plan for that. So we've been planning this for a good 2 or 3 months, and imagine a sort of script where we go through various scenarios events that happen for the Expeditionary Air Wing. So for example, they may have some safety challenges that they need to address. They have some reporting challenges where they need to write into their higher headquarters and inform them of things that are happening. They may have issues with serviceability of the aircraft. They may have welfare problems that need to be dealt with. And so all of these events, we call them injects actually, and the injects are put into the Expeditionary Air Wing via electronic means usually, so over emails through either a restricted system and up to official sensitive, or indeed the NATO or UK secret systems depending on the classification, and we also have telephones as well. All of the communications are set up here by an organisation called 90 Signals Unit, and the great news is that they're at RAF Leeming, so when things go wrong they're right on the doorstep to help out with that, and so that also gives the Expeditionary Air Wing an exposure to all of the real communications and information systems that they'll have when they're deployed into Romania. So they get to practice on all of that as well.
Can you just describe where they actually are right now and what everything kind of looks like?
Yeah, so we work on the far side of the airfield, nice and tucked out of the way by the air traffic control tower at RAF Leeming. We have a sort of small single-storey building for my core team, and actually this week, out of my core staff of 10, we've expanded up to more like 30 for White Force. So that's the team that interacts with the Expeditionary Air Wing and delivers the injects that I mentioned. So we've done the planning beforehand. My team swells up to that number, about 30 here, and we wear orange jackets actually to distinguish ourselves from the Expeditionary Air Wing. The Expeditionary Air Wing themselves are located in a rub hangar, so a rubberised hangar, just a couple of hundred metres away from us. And inside that hangar, we've set up a full communications suite with all the systems, and they can operate in there. So they're dislocated from us, but they're connected through all of our comms systems. My team here, the White Force team, will have some people here who are dealing with the comm systems and putting the information through to the Expeditionary Air Wing, and we'll have others who are observing what they're doing and mentoring them as well. So there's very much a collaborative effort here in terms of, yes, we're hitting them with difficult questions, but at the same time we're able to advise them, we're able to mentor them and improve their kind of confidence prior to their deployment. The good news is everybody is trained before they arrive here, so they've all been through phase 1 training, so they're either commissioned if they're officers or they've been through the airmen's training and indeed NCO training. And then in terms of phase 2 training, they'll all have been through their professional courses, so every different trade and branch is represented through the training that we deliver, and that's why my team needs to grow in order to effectively mentor. So we match them effectively, so there's as many of us as there are of the Expeditionary Air Wing, so it's almost one-to-one training that we're able to deliver, and then the evaluation comes from that because we can observe how effective they are at their jobs. But confidence is important before you do anything, I think, in life, and when they leave here, I talk about assurance in 2 ways. Assurance for the individuals because they feel more self-assured that they can do the job and they're confident they can do that. But it's also a confidence for the chain of command because they've asked me as the OC of the OTC to prepare these people, but also to check that they can actually do what we want them to do. And so that information gets passed up the chain of command through my post-exercise reports. And I'll identify areas that they're particularly strong at, but also areas where they might need to develop. This group are deploying very soon, so they haven't got long to improve. But certainly talking to the commander, who is very, very engaged, he's more than happy with that feedback, and he'll use that initially when he gets out into theatre to develop his own team as well. So he'll understand what they're good at and what they maybe need to improve when they first arrive.
Why is the OTC training centre needed?
We lack that assurance in terms of the chain of command may not be certain that the teams held at readiness or indeed deploying had been fully prepared. In terms of making sure that the individuals and the teams that are deploying are confident and able to do their jobs, we call this phase 3 training effectively. So they've had the professional training, but this is a way of finally checking that they can do the job. So it gives us that confidence. It gives the chain of command the assurance that they are able to do their job.
Are there any challenges?
Yeah, there's a number of challenges for me as a commander here. I mean, one of them is that my core team is actually quite small. I'm lucky enough to have full staffing at the moment, but I only have 10 staff. And when you're running a big exercise, I rely on White Force reservists and regulars from elsewhere around the Air Force. And that sounds easy, but actually acquiring those skills, finding the right people who have got the ability to not only mentor experienced people across the Air Force, but also to evaluate them with tact and diplomacy is a big challenge. So I'm really lucky that we've built a network over the years between obviously myself during my 18 months here and my predecessors of people who we can rely on to be able to do that. But in some ways, I wish they all worked for me all the time, because then I could use them, to a greater degree on a day-to-day basis. Other challenges relate to I suppose, the requirement actually, in terms of how the Royal Air Force wants to use Expeditionary Air Wings. I've got that requirement at the moment, but there is some discussion at the moment about how it might evolve in the future. We're really keen to shape that. We have some ideas because we're reasonably expert in what Expeditionary Air Wings do, seeing them all come through us for training. So, for example, in the past calendar year, we've seen 6 contingent EAWs and a non-formed EAW come through us. So we've had quite a bit of experience of the exercises that we've done. So we think we know what good EAWs look like, and then we can hopefully shape the policy to ensure that the RAF has what it needs to go on global operations at any time and place that we need to. More routinely, we'll receive a contingent EAW, so one of the 6 Expeditionary Air Wings that sits at readiness to deploy globally, and we can put them through a more in some ways more stringent testing, because we have a more complicated scenario for them. In the case of the individuals going out to Operation Biloxi in Romania in the very near future, we're able to configure our exercise around real life scenarios, so we know where they're deploying to, we understand the sort of accommodation challenges that they'll have, we've got the operational orders from the higher headquarters that tell them what they're expected to do. So we've tailored our training this week to make sure that it's real life. So that's the slight difference with this individual, this Expeditionary Air Wing that we've got going through this week.
So do you react to current threats? Do you take that into account when you're adapting your training?
Yeah, so actually on Tuesday morning, in the more sensitive briefings that we received from Air Command Headquarters, we had speakers from the Joint Force Air Component. We had speakers from Air A5, which is the planning staff, so they understand the global picture, what's going on in that region at the moment. We had intelligence briefings. We had a briefing from the Information Operations and Outreach Officer from 11 Group as well. So we've tied in speakers, and the great news these days with virtual means is that we could do that in a secure and secret environment over in 90 Signals Unit, and we exposed the Expeditionary Air Wing staff to a number of briefings about exactly what's going on today in that area of the world. We also plan to go out to Operation Biloxi itself. So in the June-July time this year, we hope to go out to visit the Expeditionary Air Wing in Romania. What we'll do while we're out there is there's two parts to it. Firstly, we'll do some external validation. The idea of that is that we look at what they were put through here on their pre-deployment training, and we will check off against those objectives and find out from the individuals who came through training whether or not it hit the spot. Did it meet the requirement that they have out there? I'll speak to the commander, I'll speak to the squadron leaders, and I'll speak to the individuals actually about how they experienced it. What could we do better next time? So that full cycle will then feed back in from a continuous improvement perspective next year. And as an organisation, I'm very keen on organisational learning, so I don't want to make the same mistakes as we've done previously, and generally we evolve over time to improve our exercise output. The other part of what we'll be doing out there in the summer is we'll be completing a force evaluation of air defence for the Royal Air Force. So we're charged, as I mentioned at the start, by NATO to ensure that our forces can meet NATO standards, and what better way of checking whether the Royal Air Force can meet NATO standards than going out to a NATO air defence operation to see how they're getting on and make sure that they have met all of those standards.
That was Wing Commander Melmoth, based at the OTC, explaining the training that personnel receive and why it's important. But how beneficial actually is it to those receiving it? I caught up with Wing Commander Holland, who's in charge of the personnel being deployed for Operation Biloxi, to find out his thoughts on the exercise.
The training here is absolutely first rate. We've got a great opportunity to bring together my team for the first time. So they go through a series of team building, getting to know each other and working alongside each other. And then we are tested and stretched with a bunch of injects that are given to us. And that's really just to prepare us for our mission as we go forward. So they're very realistic.
You mentioned injects, so what are they, and can you just give us some examples?
Yeah, no problem at all. So the injects that we face for today, for example, is we've had an aircraft accident, which we've had to role play and work through our procedures, working with a host nation and making sure that we follow a correct process and notification. We've also had discipline type challenges where people may have done something that they shouldn't have done, and I hope that won't really happen when we deploy. And also just things like vehicle crashes and the sort of day-to-day activity that we might face whilst we're deployed.
And as part of the training, there's the White Force, isn't there, which are kind of like mentors. So they're testing but also giving advice, aren't they, to your personnel?
Exactly that. It's not that we arrive here at Leeming and at the OTC and suddenly we're just expected to know everything. We're taking the experience from their years of deployments over their service career, and a lot of the team are reservists and they come back especially to help and assist us.
You mentioned about the importance of the team gelling together. Why do you think that is necessary?
I think if we go out as a team of individuals and everybody thinks that they're just doing their job in their own stovepipe, it doesn't really work. It's about knowing who your oppo is. It's about having those relationships such that if somebody is needing some support, you can detect it. If somebody's under a bit of stress, then you can help them. And if you don't know each other and you don't know how they act, you don't know how they will react to something that comes in. And just knowing each other is a great way to help with that. I've deployed numerous times, and my last job, as you're aware, was an EAW commander at a different location. And I didn't have this training before I went, and this opportunity to meet the team and gel. and actually it's been first rate to get everyone together and to go through this experience. I think throughout the whole of my career there's been mistakes and readjust as you go, and you just learn to store the positive from them. And having been away for much of the last 6-7 months, to then come back and have this excellent opportunity to go away again and bring some of that skill set will be very useful, particularly at the moment where there's a lot of contingent planning and different activity ongoing. And it's just that calmness that I hope it will help the team out and a bit of experience to guide them on their way. However, each of the individuals that's deploying with the EAW are actually the experts. They're the ones that know their field. My job is just to make sure we guide us in the right way and we conduct our operations safely and let them crack on with their work.
The training has also been quite reflective of the current situation, the conflict that's happening in Ukraine. What are your thoughts on having the injects involving current issues going on? Is that helpful?
I think it's about realism. It's about immersion in events, and it doesn't matter whether it's the events in Ukraine, as you've mentioned, or real life stuff that people have seen and witnessed before. And when you've been away and those injects have happened real time, they've caused stress amongst the team. That's the areas you really need to get to, such that when anything happens for real, they're calm, they're relaxed, and they know how to deal with it. We're going out with a very specific task as I sit here. Now that may change over coming months. I have a team of highly professional and skilled people, and we will be able to work together to resolve any tasking that we have. Should that be a change, or more likely our current tasking mission.
Wing Commander Holland there talking to me about the OTC Training Centre and the importance of personnel bonding before deployments. As you're aware, Operation Biloxi is in Romania, in Eastern Europe, and although this operation has been planned before the war in Ukraine began, I wanted to know whether the original tasking could change whilst they're out there.
I'm Group Captain Morley, and I'm DACOS A7. So I work at HQ Air Command within 11 Group. And our role in A7 is to provide collective training, operational collective training, both ground and air.
How does the current situations feed into this training? Obviously, there's issues going on in Ukraine and Eastern Europe at the moment.
Yeah, it's a changing situation politically in Eastern Europe. And what we would do is we'd pick up on that and we'd feed that into what we think we need. That's working quite well. I mentioned earlier we're a learning organisation, so we do morph. We must remain with that flexibility to stay on our toes, if you will, where we can sort of change and flex to meet the operational output. And we like to think that we can do that. For the last year or two, we've been changing from the war in Afghanistan to the possibility of a war to meet the changing future conflict needs.
So with the current training that's going on at the moment, you'll have people keeping an eye on the latest news. That'll get them fed into this process in each of the different groups who are working on this. Yes,
and that's the idea. And in actual fact, for many years now, every single exercise, major exercise, but even more importantly, every single operation, when the commander comes back, we have a team of people at Air Command who literally exploit all of their experiences to make sure that that's fed back into what we call the A5, the planning arena at Air Command. And of course, importantly, the deliverers of training, the Operational Training Centre here at Leeming. So the injects may change from one sort of operational pre-deployment training to another, just really to fit that need. And it's always been that way, because even with our contingent EAWs, we might have a rescue-orientated emergency situation internationally, right the way through to disaster relief, as well as emergency sort of air policing, or enhanced air policing, I should say.
I understand that Biloxi has been planned for about a year or so. Has the level of this operation's importance increased at all?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it has. We're all alive to the worry of what's happening in Eastern Europe, and it's our job now to just make sure that we're prepared to do whatever we are required to do alongside our NATO colleagues. It's meeting the future requirements as we see them, and we have a lot of interaction. I mean, the officer commanding of the operational training centre here is actually our NAT rep, so they are hand in glove when they work with NATO all the time, and it's the whole sort of raison d'etre with this, making sure that we can adjust to meet whatever that future need is.
And one of the needs at the moment is the humanitarian crisis born out of the war in Ukraine. We're already seeing on NATO's website, it mentions about people already seeking refuge in Romania, and that's before the personnel on Biloxi have even got out there. So potentially there could be some involvement.
I think I'd characterise that particular answer as we try to prepare people for any eventuality. So yes, we're alive to the proximity to Ukraine, and we've just witnessed one of the injects on the exercise itself, sort of suggesting how they would deal with something that perhaps host nation forces are struggling with. That's not the focus, humanitarian aid in that particular operation, but as ever, we train to sort of ensure people can adjust and adapt to the environment.
That was the group captain speaking to me about Operation Biloxi and the training given to personnel. From these interviews, it's clear the RAF is flexible. The training given to the men and women being deployed is designed to challenge them and allow them to make mistakes, so to reduce the chance of them happening when they're out in theatre. This is just part one of the episode. I'll be catching up with personnel on Operation Biloxi again to find out how they're getting on, whether the training really has helped them, and if they think it's missing anything. Thanks for listening.
I'm SAC Victoria Andrews, and this is Reheat on Inside Air. Following previous updates, the RAF continues to support NATO partners across Europe by carrying out enhanced vigilance activities. This activity provides air policing of NATO airspace, which ensures a robust response to the Russian aggression seen in Ukraine and further contributing to the security of Europe. Elsewhere, a Royal Air Force Poseidon maritime reconnaissance aircraft has been operating with a Royal Navy frigate in the Baltic Sea to monitor submarine activity in the area. Flying from RAF Leeming, the 120 Squadron Poseidon conducted air-maritime integration with HMS Richmond, a Type 23 frigate. The aim was to ensure the safe transit of British and Danish supply ships as they delivered military vehicles and equipment to their battle group forces in Estonia. The aircraft and ship were operating as part of the Joint Expeditionary Force. That's a UK-led task group of 10 nations held at high readiness to respond to global events. The Ministry of Defence is investing £695 million over the next 11 years to provide in-service support to the Royal Air Force's fleet of Hawk 2 training aircraft and the Hawk T1 jets flown by the Red Arrows. Director Combat Air at Defence Equipment and Support, Air Vice Marshal Ellard, said, "Delivering world-class training to our future pilots. The Hawk T2 is a fantastic platform to train our Typhoon and Lightning pilots on, readying them for the demands of the front line. This level of ongoing investment ensures UK defence will retain our military edge within the contested air environment." That's Reheat on Inside Air.
I'm SAC Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound from inside the cockpit of Blackjack, the 2022 Typhoon display aircraft during takeoff. This year's Typhoon display pilot is Flight Lieutenant Adam O'Hare, an instructor on 29 Squadron. He will be delivering a dynamic, fast-paced display showcasing the remarkable capabilities of Typhoon. His day job is to train new pilots to operate the world-class swing-roll aircraft, learning how to use its systems, power and agility to defend both the UK and NATO's interests. The RAF currently uses Typhoon on quick reaction alerts in the UK and the South Atlantic, on Operation Shader in the Middle East, and recently in support of NATO allies in Eastern Europe. Adam, along with his team of engineers and support personnel, will be appearing at air shows up and down the country this summer, so look out for them and you'll be guaranteed a Foon time.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.